Good day to everybody. My name is Luke. In this previously recorded video lecture, my team and I will be discussing the idea of utilitarianism in ethics. The primary source of our content is John Stuart Mill's Utilitarianism, released in 2001 by Batoche Books Limited. After studying this lesson, you should be able to demonstrate the utilitarian principle's role as the moral foundation and identify the 10 misconceptions on utilitarianism. To help you attain the following objectives, Group 4 will dissect the lesson, starting with yours truly, by introducing John Stuart Mill, to be followed by Kai, discussing the book Utilitarianism by John Stuart Mill. Allyah, XZ, and Xylil will explain the misconceptions on utilitarianism. And we have Clark, who will conclude our lesson. So without further ado, let's start the ball rolling. John Stuart Mill was an English philosopher and economist. Utilitarianism, one of his best-known articles, was written by him in 1861. Understanding the context of Mill's essay requires knowledge of his own life story. James Mill, Mill's father, instilled in him a strictly utilitarian perspective. Additionally, Jeremy Bentham assisted in Mill's upbringing, and Mill greatly appreciated Bentham's works. Mill had an intellectual and rigid upbringing, and when he started to doubt some of his ideas at the age of 21, he had a mental breakdown. Later, Mill battled his perception that utilitarianism was too impersonal and that it was incapable of capturing or comprehending the higher pleasures. Thus, it is appropriate to see Mill's works as the outcome of an effort to harmonize utilitarianism with the intricacies that Bentham's theory overlooked.
Now let us have an overview about Mill's famous work, The Utilitarianism. The Utilitarianism of 1861 was written by John Stuart Mill to support its value as a moral theory to answer its misconception. In this writing, he expressed his beliefs as well as his arguments. Generally speaking, he claims that actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, wrong as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness. For Mill, anything that does not produce happiness given the standards of how to attain happiness is wrong. However, not in all means that whatever makes one happy is already accepted in this theory. As we go along in this report, we will be talking about what kind of happiness is generally accepted in this theory. Is it self-pleasure? Is it the pleasure of your certain group? Or is it those of the general? Moving forward, we have here the greatest happiness principle, which is the ultimate end with reference to and for the sake of which all other things are desirable. It is an existence attempt as far as possible from pain and as rich as possible in enjoyments, both in quality and quantity. It is believed to be the foundation of utilitarianism, for it describes actions in right proportion to the amount they tend to increase happiness, and wrong in proportion to how much they tend to produce the opposite of happiness. The purpose of utility is defined as happiness without pain. The creators of this principle also stated that an action must be an optical choice with higher quality. It must be favored by the majority in order to determine which is of superior quality and would therefore be the right thing to do. This idea behind utilitarianism was from its two founders, Jeremy Bentham and his student John Stuart Mill. It was for the purpose of promoting the greatest amount of good for the greatest number. He based the theory on the principle that an action is right when it produces happiness and wrong when it creates the opposite of happiness. To further elaborate, Mill notes that utilitarianism has influenced the shaping of moral doctrines vastly, even among people like Immanuel Kant, who reject such principles. Mill also stated in his beliefs and arguments to support his theory. He explains that the idea of justice is based on utility due to the fact that they are needed for human happiness. He argues that pleasure is based on quantity and quality, that the sole basis of morality is happiness, which has the highest importance in making our lives valuable. He also argues that right exists only because it is needed for human happiness. He argues that utilitarianism corresponds with natural feelings that result from the social character of humans.
The greatest happiness principle is believed to be the foundation of utilitarianism. It describes that actions are right in proportion to the amount they tend to increase happiness and wrong in proportion to how much they tend to produce the opposite of happiness. The purpose of utility is defined as happiness without pain. The creators of this principle also stated that an action must be an optical choice with higher quality. It must be favored by the majority in order to determine which is of superior quality and would therefore be the right thing to do. This idea behind utilitarianism was formed by its two founders, Jeremy Bentham and his student John Stuart Mill. It was for the purpose of promoting the greatest amount of good for the greatest number. Tranquility and excitement are the main constituents of a satisfied life. It is believed that this is the main goal of utilitarianism, for each individual to live a satisfied life. According to Mill, the only indication that something is desirable is when others express their desire for it. Because everyone wants to be happy, it is true that happiness is good. Utilitarianism has a lot of circulating misconceptions throughout history. A number of these said misconceptions were discussed and answered by John Stuart Mill in the second chapter of his book. The first misconception he addressed was that he saw that people understood utilitarianism as opposition to pleasure, when in fact, the true definition of utility is pleasure itself. Any other situation, event, or experience is desirable only inasmuch as it is a source of pleasure. Activities are good when they lead to a higher degree of general happiness and bad when they diminish that level.
The claim that it is base and demeaning to reduce the meaning of life to pleasure. According to Mill, a pleasure is of higher quality if people would prefer it over a different pleasure, even if it is accompanied by discomfort, and if they would not trade it for a greater amount of the other pleasure. Furthermore, Mill claims that it is an unquestionable fact that people will favor pleasures that appeal to their higher faculties when given equal access to all types of pleasures. A human will not choose to turn into an animal. A person with education won't choose to become uneducated, and so on. Even a person who uses higher faculties frequently has greater hardship in life. He would never intentionally choose a life of less dignity. The confusion of happiness with contentment. Higher capable individuals frequently experience lower levels of happiness and contentment because of their awareness of the world's limitations. However, they frequently enjoy themselves more than an animal or an uneducated person. Furthermore, Mill argues that individuals with experience of both higher and lower pleasures are most suited to judge the total quality of a given pleasure. Mill states that society would still gain even if having a noble character reduced an individual's enjoyment, because the greatest happiness principle takes into account overall happiness. A noble character is still desirable by a utilitarian criterion, even if it is less beneficial for the individual. The comparison of different pleasures. According to Mill, utilitarianism is more than just an evaluation of inner feelings. All actions and experiences are evaluated according to a number of diverse enjoyment aspects that correspond to the type of experience rather than by a single reductive standard. Higher pleasures would be weighted by utilitarianism, and Mill contends that the utility measurement does not devalue them.
Happiness could not be the rational aim of human life because it is unattainable. All rational people go through life with their minds made up on certain basic questions of right and wrong. People who can achieve the most happiness are the people who live off selfishness and lack of mental cultivation. If people whose education is nurtured with values, morals, and ethics, they could not possibly attain happiness. But if a society is willing to eradicate the evils of the world, such as poverty and diseases, it can be alleviated with and by a wise and energetic society dedicated to their abolition. Utilitarianism can leave people cold and unsympathizing. Happiness is difficult to achieve because happiness can cause people to be sinful. Most people who became virtuous are the people who renounce happiness. Even Mill admitted that some martyrs gave up their happiness to become a virtuous person. It means that to become a good person or a person of God, they must eradicate their happiness. Some other people are willing to become monsters so that they can have their happiness. A person cannot achieve real happiness if that person became selfless. You cannot achieve pleasure if you think about the feelings of another person or if you care to what will happen to them. Being cold is a choice, and they made a choice when they choose the satisfaction of pleasures. And when they made that choice, they choose to become a person that only wants pleasure, and they must prioritize their happiness over the happiness of others. To achieve the happiness they want, these people will not be concerned about the consequences of their actions and what will happen to another person. Utilitarianism is a godless doctrine. Mill called utilitarianism a godless doctrine because its moral foundation is the human happiness and not the will of God. Mill also said that criticism is based on our perception of God's moral character. For if God desires the happiness of all his creatures, utilitarianism is more religious than any other doctrine. Utilitarianism is frequently confused with expediency and thus considered immoral. However, the term expedient usually refers to going against what is right for the sake of a personal gain or short-term objectives. As a result, rather than being useful, this definition of expediency is actually harmful.
Next, the utilitarian view is often dismissed or stigmatized as an immoral doctrine by generally naming it as expediency. Expediency means achieving something to attain convenience or practicality, even it will be morally wrong or bad in general. Mill argues that the term expedient is acting against what is right for personal gain, which is the opposite of utilitarianism, since we all know that utilitarianism is the ethical theory that determines what is morally right and wrong based on the outcomes of these actions that garners the most happiness or pleasure with most people. Therefore, it is not generally about having just your own happiness, but also taking into consideration others' satisfaction as well. Which brings us to the question, is the utilitarian view really self-indulgent? Not really. While utilitarianism is the branch of the useful, expediency is the branch of the hurtful. Now, utilitarianism is widely being criticized, and one of which is that it is too allowing. Critics of utilitarianism argue that a utilitarian might make one action and put an exemption to the rules and just plainly justify it by saying it will increase utility. However, John Stuart Mill argues that this problem is not only limited to its utilitarian theories. He says that all theories and creeds need to have exceptions as they are a part of our reality. The defenders of utility argue that even in the beginning, mankind did not have the time to weigh the amount of happiness in every action as they perform or create, making way for exceptions applicable. Philosophers by no means have their received code as divine right, and we humans still have a lot to learn. This invokes that a standard of utility is better than having no standards at all. It has also been pointed out by Mills that the standard of judging in utilitarianism is by measuring the happiness of all. Over everyone else, one should not value their happiness more than the greater collective. However, once again, the utilitarian view does not completely consider sacrifices as generally good, only when it promotes happiness. Moreover, this ethical theory does not concern itself with the motives behind one's actions. Roughly, it means that it doesn't matter how you get what you want as long as you get it. An example would be lying on a resume to get a good job and justifying the lie by saying the larger income will enable the liar to provide more adequately for his family. Another might be justifying the abortion of a baby to save the life of the mother. Lying and taking an innocent life are both morally wrong, but providing for one's family and saving the life of a woman are morally right. Where, then, does one draw the line? In summary, utilitarianism is a theory of morality that advocates actions that foster happiness or pleasure and oppose actions that cause unhappiness or harm. When directed towards making social, economic, or political decisions, a utilitarian philosophy would aim for the betterment of society as a whole. Before we end, I would like to give you a hypothetical situation to fully understand its concepts. Consider this complex situation. Our teacher arrives on the first day of class and makes the following announcement. Let's not have class all semester. We will not inform the authorities and we will keep it as a secret. None of us will do any work. I will not have to teach and you do not have to study. I will give you each an A and you can give me excellent teaching evaluations. All of us will be happy and the net utility increased. Any questions? Class dismissed. On the one hand, the action appears to maximize utility. No one has to work and no one is hurt. On the other hand, consider that the students are nursing students who need to learn the class material in order to function as competent nurses. If they do not learn the material, it is easy to see that they will be incompetent nurses. A society of incompetent nurses decreases the net utility, and therefore, in this case, canceling class decreases net utility. That's all for today. We hope that you have learned a lot. Thanks for watching.